You're going to have a great morning this morning. You've got three freshmen that are rising stars in the conservative movement. I look forward to sharing the panel discussion with them this morning. Let me introduce them. Congressman Tom Emmer represents Minnesota's 6th Congressional District. He serves on the House Financial Services Committee. Tom graduated from the William Mitchell College of Law in 2004. He was elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives and was re-elected in 2006 and 2008. You've heard he's already had a strong bipartisan piece of legislation come through from all the way to the House floor. Pretty remarkable for a freshman. It's a great job, Tom. Look forward to sharing this morning with you. Congressman French Hill represents Arkansas' 2nd Congressional District, and he's a 9th generation Arkansan. Now, I'd rather be a 9th generation Texan than Arkansas. But that said, actually, we came to Texas before it was actually Texas. So I'm not sure what you'd call us, because Texas was a Spanish territory at the time. He served, spent 2 decades as a commercial banker and investment manager. He also served as a senior official for President George H.W. Bush's administration. And in the House, he sits on the House Financial Services Committee, and he and I share a dear friend that also worked in 41's administration, a guy named Fred McClure, who's one of my classmates from Texas A&M. So there you go. Congressman Mike Bishop represents Michigan's 8th Congressional District. He serves on the Judiciary Committee and the Education Workforce Committee. He's also a member of the House Steering Committee. Before coming to Congress, he served as stationed in the Michigan State Legislature, taught law, and served as a private attorney for family, small businesses, and local governments. And before we begin our panel discussion, I want to talk a little bit about what the Republican Study Committee has been up to the past few months and what you can expect from us over the remainder of 2016. We have always served a very important function in the House. It is the largest caucus, actually in the entire Congress. We're the largest caucus in Congress. Today we have 176 members. And we do several things. We provide sort of the conservative conscience of the movement inside the House of Representatives. We also provide the tool sets that allow people to help them analyze legislation. Our legislative bulletins that we put out with every piece of legislation, every suspension bill, you name it, we put it out. And it's sort of the go-to guide for members of Congress to look at in terms of how every piece of legislation fits with our conservative ideals. We have the strongest network of conservatives in the House, and we also are the idea factory. We're the folks that come up with bold ideas. I'll talk about one of them in a minute. It didn't go very far, but at least it was something to think about, which caused people to be stimulated in ways to think about different things. Last year, when I became chair, we laid out a bold conservative agenda that was focused on the following 5 principles. 1, we wanted to expand economic opportunity through more jobs and better paychecks. 2nd, we wanted to fix Washington's fiscal mess. 3rd, we wanted to rebuild American national security. 4th, we wanted to protect American values. And 5th, we wanted to restrict the federal government to its constitutionally limited role. And we crafted every policy proposal we crafted fit with those 5 principles. The first thing that we rolled out last year was a blueprint for a balanced budget. And the RSC budgets have always been the most aspirationally, conservatively aspirational budgets in the House. And last year's was no exception. If you look at the things that are in RSC budgets, they typically migrate into House budgets over time. For instance, if I go back to my first freshman year, that the RSC budget we did that year proposed that the federal budget be balanced in 10 years or less. The House budget at that time was going to balance in about 30. And so when we moved to 2012, my second year of my freshman term, what did we have on the floor of the House? The House budget had a 10-year balance. And we've always had provisions, that's just one great example, we've always had provisions in RSC budgets that migrated to the House budgets. Again, continuing to push the House budgets in a conservative direction, the House overall in a conservative direction. Last year's budget was our most conservative budget ever. It balanced in 6 years. It cut Washington's spending by $7.1 trillion over 10 years. It also strengthened our national defense, and it repealed Obamacare through reconciliation. That ultimately became part of the House budget last year, and we actually had that reconciliation vote. Unfortunately, the president chose to hurt the American people by vetoing our reconciliation. As I said before, these have always impacted the House budgets over time. We also rolled out the American Healthcare Reform Act. It is our vision for replacement for Obamacare. We have more co-sponsors on this bill than any other piece of healthcare reform legislation in the House. It is a patient-centered solution that relies on free market principles. It increases competition and choice, and it lowers premiums and improves access. That's what we were all about. I mean, when you look at healthcare reform, lower premiums and improve access. And this is what it does. If you look at Obamacare, it's done exactly the opposite. Last year, as we were approaching August, September, it appeared that, I don't mean any disrespect, but it appeared that our House leadership was not doing anything about an upcoming debt ceiling vote. And the House had done a great job, the Appropriations had done a great job in terms of getting appropriations bills out of the Appropriations Committee and on the House floor. We actually got all 12 marked up in appropriations, got 6 on the House floor. Over 200 great policy writers came out of the RSC and went into those appropriations bills. We were so successful last year, we got a lot of them in base tax. But then, but you saw what happened in the Senate. They couldn't even get the defense approach bill passed. So we started getting together to think about how do we deal with appropriations and how do we deal with the debt ceiling. We came up with something called the Terms of Credit Act. It was based on 3 key considerations. One is budget, and that was to stick to the savings in a previously held House and pass Senate budget. You remember the House and Senate ultimately did pass a budget last year. The second provision was work. If Congress misses its spending deadlines, it must keep it working until the problem solved. In August, the recess would go away, weekends would go away, we'd keep moving forward. And then the grow part of our plan was to put in a regulatory freeze so that any pending regulation that had not gone into effect would be deferred, the implementation would be deferred to July of 2017, and also that all the regulators would have to put their pens down until July of 2017. Think about what that would have done. Think about how American businesses today, and the ones you represent in this audience, could have just taken a sigh of relief and said, okay, we at least have some window that we can reinvest in our businesses and our people and our physical property, physical plan, our intellectual property to move forward. Think about what that would have done for us. We didn't have much runway for this, unfortunately, because when leadership tried a couple of other things, and when they finally said, "Oop, those aren't going to work," they turned to us and said, "Why don't you do this?" This is an idea that would have taken a little more runway to get off the ground, but it is something that's still out there and something we're looking at. This year, we're continuing to build on the agenda and the performance that we had last year, and we think it's more important than ever, given what's coming out of the administration and also the presidential race, to lay out that positive vision, and also to fit well with what Speaker Ryan is doing in his bold agenda project, because since we're 2/3 of the Republican conference in the House, it gives us an opportunity to have a unique input into his agenda program. We rolled out our second blueprint for a balanced budget. It was 2.0. It was more aggressive in terms of cutting the deficit. The top line number was $974 billion discretionary spending, compared to $1.040 trillion to $1.070 trillion, depending on where we get a budget, where it'll come out. It balances in 8 years. It saves taxpayers $8.6 trillion. It still prioritizes defense. It promotes pro-growth tax reforms and incentivizes growth. And it takes an aggressive position in terms of dealing with welfare reform, or as we call it, economic empowerment. Later on this year, we will roll out the American Healthcare Reform Act 2.0. We've got a great task force that's working on that. It will take the work that we did last year. Again, remember, we've got more co-sponsors on our bill than anybody else. And it will actually begin. We've got a lot of input from the healthcare space and the insurance space and the pharmaceutical space. We'll be able to incorporate those provisions moving forward. One of the things I'm proudest about is an initiative that's been led by Andy Barr and by Todd Young, and that's our Economic Empowerment Initiative. This is something we at the RSC started thinking about several months ago, but it fits well with what Paul Ryan would like to do in terms of welfare reform and economic empowerment more overall. We basically just said, okay, the war on poverty has not worked, and we've spent $16+ trillion on this. Let's start with a blank sheet of paper. What's the best social program that you can create? What's the best safety net? It's a job. What is it we can do to expand jobs? What is it we can do to keep families together, to encourage family formation, not to break families apart? So if you think about all the things that our current welfare system does, it destroys dignity, and it creates despondency and dependency. And so what we're trying to do is to get rid of dependency and despondency and create dignity in the virtuous cycle of having a job and a strong family behind you. So we had a soft rollout of that over the last few days. Wait, you'll see us present it to Paul Ryan and the Economic Empowerment Initiative that we have in the House overall. The appropriations process, as I said earlier, we had 200 plus amendments to the appropriations process last year. I think we are going to have an appropriations process this year. I mean, based on what I'm seeing out of the Senate, we'll see, but it looks like we will. We have not counted all the RSC policy writers that have been sent over to the appropriations committee. We'll have that number for you a little bit later on, but we're going to be positive, play a positive part of that. We are going to be, so we'll continue to be active on appropriations. We are anticipating some pushback from the Senate and also from the President on what we've tried to do. Of the 200 plus policy writers we had in last year's appropriations process, we had about a little over a dozen that made it into the omnibus, so that was disappointing from our standpoint. But you know, we all know that when you put yourself in a position, when the House puts itself in a position to not be able to deliver 218 votes on our version of an appropriations bill, and then it basically cedes to the other side, to the Democrats, the control of what's ultimately in the spending bill, and that's what happened last year. That said, we did keep some great policy writers in there. With that, I'd like to invite Tom and Mike and French to come up with me, and we'll start our roundtable discussion. So Jim, how's this supposed to work?
Right back here. You can actually start just going down the line, and these three fine gentlemen can talk about the passions, about what they are going after, as well as give us a little update as to what is going on in Michigan and Minnesota and way down south.
Okay. Let's start with our ninth generation Arkansas. What's on your agenda for the rest of the 114th?
Thanks, Bill. It's a pleasure to work with you as chairman of the RSC. And of course, it's helpful because I married into a family where they were 50% University of Texas graduates and 50% Texas A&M graduates. So I speak Aggie, and I've brokered a lot of Thanksgiving meals over the years. But it is a pleasure to be with you. Well, I'm proud to be on the Financial Services Committee, and one thing I've tried to do on that committee is take my 35 years of business experience in finance, both in investment banking and commercial banking, and my work in economic policy, the Treasury, and the White House to bring some common sense to this regulatory debate that we have all the time about what are the effects of Dodd-Frank, for example, on the industry and on consumers particularly. What's the actual impact of taking the existing regulatory system that we had and layering the Dodd-Frank constraints over the top of it, and then seeing what the outputs are. And the reason why I don't think you had a lot of legislative proposals of significance or even major pushback from Congress until 5 years later is because industry and consumers saw no impact of Dodd-Frank until it slowly began to roll through the administrative procedures process. And that's why I would say in 2010 it passed. 11, 12, people were talking about it, and maybe the big banks were concerned about the Volcker Rule debate, for example. But the average person out there trying to buy a house or buy a manufactured home for their farm or get a consumer loan or qualify for a regular mortgage on a house, they just didn't see the pernicious impact of the whole thing until in the last 12 to 24 months. And so now on the 5th anniversary of Dodd-Frank, we have a real consensus, I think, and I'd enjoy hearing Tom's view, between Democrats and Republicans that this law is broken, it's not working, it's impacted our capital markets, it's impacted our corporate competitiveness on raising debt and equity capital, it's constraining consumers' ability to get credit, It's stopped innovation out in the banking sector, whether you're a $100 million bank down in Stuttgart, Arkansas, or a $1 trillion bank up in Manhattan. And that is not how we stay number one in the world in an economy, because a financial system is absolutely a mirror image of the health and prosperity and future of your non-financial economic base in your whole country. So I really see a lot of interest on the part of Democrats on our committee to taking steps to make change if they can get their leadership to go along, and that's why I'm hopeful with the next president that we'll make some progress. So proud to be with you this morning.
So, thank you, French. Tom, tell us a little bit about what's going on in Minnesota. What you've got on your agenda this year.
First, Bill, thank you. Thanks for what you do with the RSC. Jim, thanks for the invitation, and thank you, all of you, for being here this morning. Again, I'm Tom Emmer. I represent a district that was held by somebody you might recall, Michelle Bachmann. She was one of the choir members. Thank you, friends. So the district is incredibly diverse. It is about 30 to 35 miles north of the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and it starts on the Wisconsin border. And literally, if you look up the term redistricting in the dictionary, I think you'll find a picture of this district, because it wraps all the way around the Twin Cities from the east to the west. And it's a very unique district because while Minnesota ranks as high as number 4 on some lists for the financial services industry in the country, most people would think of Chicago right away, but it's Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. I have 60,000 people, roughly, that are employed in the financial services industry in the district. The other thing that's interesting about the district is if you work at Medtronic, you probably live in the district. If you work at Boston Scientific, you probably live in our district. We are just that ex-urban area, just beyond the inner ring suburbs. The other thing that's interesting is the ground, more than 50% of it is still in agricultural production. So you've got everything in this district, and it's been interesting since I came here. I would agree with French. It's an honor to be on the Financial Services Committee. To me, that's the plumbing of our free market economy that we're dealing with. The thing that makes this country unique, more unique than anywhere else in the world, is the ability to get capital, to form capital for that next great idea. So for me, coming here is about making us competitive again, because it's all about the American dream. If you play by the rules, if you work hard, and if you are innovative, you too can be whoever you want to be, but we're killing it. In fact, I would say, to use this example, our financial system in this country, which used to be amongst the most free and accessible, yeah, we had our problems, but the money flowed. Guess what? We have done to the financial services industry across this country what we're now apparently trying to do to the internet. More regulation, more government weight on top of the ability for people to create things. So I had this great opportunity with the Financial Stability Oversight Council. That bill, we're going to keep pushing those types of reforms, Bill. But I'll give you an example of something else that we're working on. I think someday we are going to have to completely gut the tax system in this country. We have to go back to the drawing board in order for us to be competitive, not just here at home, but all around the globe. We're going to have to go to a flat tax or a fair tax or something completely different. And I did this because I'm still so happy. As you can tell, my wife always says, Tom, you got to smile. Everybody's going to think you're angry. Well, there's reason to be when you just got through tax day, right? 75,000 pages of what? So let's just talk about, you got to completely bail on the system and redo it. In the meantime, we got to start working on the things that we can. So I got a new bill that in Washington speak, I won't give you the long thing, it's called the Create Jobs Act. You know, this country has the highest corporate tax rate of any developed country in the world, at 39%. Just think about how many jobs we are losing, how many companies, and since 2012, we've lost 22 companies to go overseas. Take Minnesota, one of our great success stories that was started in a garage. Medtronic is now an Irish company after its deal with Covidien. This has to change, and it has to change soon. So the idea that we've got is you take the average of the 34 countries that are members of the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the free market countries, pro-Western countries, You take their average and you reduce that by 5 percentage points, which would put us at about 20%. And then you reevaluate that every 5 years so that you stay competitive, so that we can start to reverse that flow and bring it back home and have these things work right here in the United States. That's a priority. Minnesota, lastly, because this is the guy you came to hear from, Bishop, not me. He's the best looking one. Sorry, Bill. Minnesota is going to be very unique. We've got, I would say that even though everybody thinks we're schizophrenic, and maybe we are politically, we are going to have some of the most hotly contested congressional races in the country this year. And it's going to affect people like me and Eric Paulson because of it. John Klein is retired. They are going to put $15 million plus into that seat. Nancy Pelosi just made a $2.5 million buy about 3 weeks ago, and that's the first one. The problem with this is that that is movable, right? So they can see where they're at come September, and they can start moving that money around. And this media market not only is Tom Emmer, Eric Paulson, John Klein's seat, a couple of Democrats, but it also actually is the southern part of Sean Duffy's district across the Wisconsin border. So we've got Stuart Mills up in the north, which will be very competitive again with Rick Nolan. And all I'll say, I'll finish it with this because I'm sure you're going to hear about Michigan, where Mike's got some interesting stories about their political situation. I was telling our table, the anger out there is more than just palpable. I mean, you don't have to kind of feel the audience to get an idea of where the anger is when you see crossed arms and heads shaking like this. I mean, the district that I'm in, Ted Cruz won it just barely on our caucus night. Rubio was right behind him, and Trump was right behind Rubio. So the other thing is we have an electorate that they really don't know what they want. They're very angry, and they're trying to figure it out. And we need to be really good at the retail ground game this year to make sure that we don't have any mistakes and any surprises. Thank you again for having us here.
Thanks, Tom. Mike, tell us about your hair. What's going on? You have the best hair of this group, that's for sure.
For the most part, I still have my hair, but I'm not saying it lasts so long around here. This has been a very interesting year for me. I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve on the study committee, to be a part of a group of freshmen. I'm so grateful to serve with Tom and French and a group of great freshman leaders who have come into Congress with a sense of responsibility and a sense of urgency, which I think is really important right now, because as Tom said, I do believe that our constituents as a whole have really reached the end of the road. And I know that you talk to the same folks that I talk to, so you can understand where I'm coming from. But we really have got to do something to restore the faith and confidence in the American people. And the way we do that is to move this ship forward and get this government back on track. And we desperately need to do that. One of the things we can do is focus on our budget and make sure that we get these appropriation bills done, that we have an open and honest debate about issues. Talk about priorities of government. It's so important that we do that. The American people are waiting for Republicans to show what they stand for. And until we do that, we can't expect them to support us and vote for us. So that I believe that this budget is one of the most important things that we can do right now, the appropriations bills, to do it in an open and transparent way, to have open debate, to talk about the priorities of government, and I look forward to doing that. I just want to, for me it's important to let you know where I came from, because it really is why I believe the things that I do today. I was brought up in a family. My father served in the state legislature when I grew up. When I grew up, everybody in my community was a Republican. My dog was a Republican. It was just the way it was. And the reason for that was because my parents always told me that you had to connect common sense with public policy. And that's why I was Republican. To me, it made sense. Public policy should be a reflection of what society deems as just and right. And so I've always looked at public policy that way. I had the opportunity to serve in the state government at a time when our state was spiraling downward, desperately spiraling downward. Michigan, you just might as well have written it off in about 2008. And that was about that time that I rose to Senate Majority Leader. Therefore, I was #1 target. And I can tell you back then, you could have put our caucus in a phone booth. The number of Republicans in the state of Michigan had contracted. And our governor at the time believed in her heart that she could solve this financial crisis by spending your way out of it. And it failed miserably. And we had a 2-member majority in the Michigan Senate when I was there, as Senate Majority Leader. We were the only majority in the entire state. And our majority consisted of 1,200 extra votes. 2 of our members won by 1,200 extra votes. That's how slim it was. But we stood firm, and we stood on a principle, and that is that government should focus on core principles. And at a time, especially in economic difficult situations, we were in a full-on depression at the time in Michigan. We were losing hundreds of millions of dollars a year. This is really what defined me, because our caucus stood together. We stood together for a government that represented core values, and we were able to beat the governor at the time and really pass budgets that did not include tax increases, that showed that you could reform and cut spending, and it wouldn't, the sun would still rise the next day. And lo and behold, in 2010, when the next election hit, a Republican wave hit. And that wave completely changed the core government, so that we had more Republicans elected than any other time since 1948. And I would argue since 2010, Michigan has made one of the most dramatic comebacks in the history of states. From 2008 to 2009, we went from number 11 in per capita income to number 41. That's how fast the dive took. Since 2010, since the new governor has taken over with the new Republican majority, it's been a whole different story. I believe that kind of historical transformation can happen at the federal level. That's why I ran for Congress. I want to be a part of that revolution with my colleagues to turn this country around, to do like we did in Michigan, to go from here to straight up to a place where we belong. And I'm grateful to serve in the study committee, because I believe that's really the very essence of where this all will start.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Mike.